as you guys have scaled past hundreds of properties, how do you balance that kind of personalization to offer a great owner experience with the scalability?
We didn't quite understand that housekeeping was going to end up being half of our business. By the time we realized it was a big problem, we were losing a ton of money.
How do you know that a department is ready for delegation?
I hear other managers say, we have a relentless focus on guest experience. Great, I'm sure your guests are having a great experience. What's your owner experience like?
In interviewing your two other co-founders, they've both agreed on the fact that you're particularly good at dealing with conflict. If we break that skill set down into actionable best practices, what's your approach to dealing with conflict with homeowners? Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hospitality Edge podcast, where we bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality, and really where we bring together entrepreneurs, investors, founders, leaders, operators in the vacation rental space so they can tell us about their stories, their lessons that they have learned along the way, as well as perhaps some of the mistakes that they have made so we don't have to make those same mistakes ourselves. Today, I'm super excited to be here with Luke. He's the co-founder and CEO at Renjoy. And this is actually part of a 3-episode series that we're doing on the 3 co-founders at Renjoy. So I'm excited to be here with you, Luke. Before we get into it, where are you taking the call from?
And Colorado Springs.
Colorado Springs, amazing. And so
Yes,
I'll start with a question that we like to open with. So if you had to start this journey of yours all over again, and there's one mistake that you could go back and try to fix or do differently, if anything, what would it be that you would do differently?
Yeah, great question. Looking back, I think probably the thing we underestimated the most going into this was the complexity of the financials. I think that's probably true of any business, but I think particularly in the short-term rental space, involving things like trust accounting and things like that, it got very complicated very quickly, and then suddenly we were over our skis, and honestly, we're still recovering from the mistakes of very early on. Not taking that quite seriously enough and prepping enough.
And I want dig deeper here because we kind of funny enough, it was the same thing that was mentioned. I think it was by Jacob, and we got a little bit deeper into it. So yeah, you guys all seem to agree on the fact that this is something you would take more seriously earlier. What about you personally? Like not as far as the business goes, but as far as something that you personally wish you had perhaps done differently or looked at differently or started working on earlier, other than this, finance and accounting piece?
Yeah, good question. So from early on, one of my big roles was kind of building up our operations, so all of our housekeeping and maintenance and things like that. I think I wish I would have spent a little less time running around and doing the work and a little more time really thinking about the long term for those departments. I think specifically housekeeping, we didn't quite understand the gravity that housekeeping was going to end up being half of our business. And same kind of thing where by the time we realized it was a big problem, we had gotten big enough and we were far enough along. It was a really big problem. And both just operationally, and we were losing a ton of money all of a sudden. And so I think, if I could go back, I would have started planning and drilled into that a little bit closer from the beginning.
That's a good point. How did you make that transition from just running around and kind of trying to fix problems just temporarily to going into like more of a long-term thinking play of like, okay, I'm building the machines here, building the departments, the functions?
Yeah. I think it's a balance starting a business, right? Like, when you're starting out early on, you have to be running around because there's a good chance that there's no one else to do the things that need to get done. And we grew pretty quickly. There was a lot of demand for the product we were selling at the time. And that was really exciting. And so we all were working really hard to just keep the machine running. And I think over the last year and a half or so in particular, we've realized we need to start stepping back and, take a closer look, like you said, start working on the machine, really working on the business and not so much in the business. And it's still a transition, all of us are still working in the business. I'm
Mm-hmm.
still doing the majority of our sales day to day.
Mm-hmm.
That said, making sure to block time and you got to intentionally take time, because otherwise the day to day is going to suck up all of your time. And so stepping back, taking that time to do things like manage and plan. One thing Jacob may have talked about it, but we're really intentional as owners and as a leadership team about taking time, each week to do our nice long leadership meeting. Quarterly, we do a VTO where we get off site and we really take an entire day. And actually, next week we're doing our annual VTO where we do an overnight and take 2 days to step back and look at the big problems and decide as we go forward this year, what are the big things we want to tackle. And then it becomes a lot easier on a weekly or a monthly basis to go back to those things and say, hey, are we focusing on these things enough? Are the things we're working on a day-to-day basis working towards these larger goals? So I think all of that is really important.
Oh, that's a good point. Now, if we go like department by department, because of course you were very involved in operations, onboarding, housekeeping, maintenance. How do you know that you kind of a department is ready for delegation? In your experience, was it like finding the
Yeah.
right person that would become the lead? Was it having the right SOPs? And therefore, even if the person's not there just yet, at the end of the day, the process is there. Like, what was that process like for you?
I think part of it's about, the maturity of the company, recognizing, when a role should be passed on, when is something taking too much of your time personally, and it could be done by someone else, so that you can delegate and elevate, your time. There's a lot to that. It's definitely challenging, especially when you've been in a role. I think probably the one that sticks out to me most is our owner relations. Dealing directly with our owners. From the very beginning, that was one of my main roles. And so for the first 3 years of the company, I was exclusively in that role just by myself. So I knew every owner. I owned every relationship with our owner and with our owners. And as we've grown, my time got more and more stretched and had less and less time for each owner, along with all the other responsibilities that I've got. And so, I think there's a few things that it really takes to get to that point. Yeah, like you said, first you got to find the right person, right? You got to find the person that wants the job, that's got the capacity to do the job, and that's not always easy. I went through a few people. I've got someone fantastic in an owner relations, our owner advocate role now, but I had to cycle through a few people before that happened, and I didn't honestly cycle through people fast enough, probably. So once you've got that, I mean, that's really important. And then again, preparing the role and thinking through how is this going to operate differently when it's not just me. Now we're a department. We're no longer just an individual doing a job. We're a department, and what things need to function differently. What accountability needs to be in place that wasn't really necessary before, because I knew I was going to get the job done, but now I need to check and make sure the job is getting done. So making sure those things are in place. Making sure all the thoughts, all the knowledge that's in your head is documented somewhere, the processes that you go through on a daily basis, all the things that maybe you take for granted because you've been doing them for 3 years every single day. And so it doesn't even seem like a process to you. It's just something that happens, making sure that could be well documented and well structured and passed on in a way that actually makes sense to other people.
Those are all
So
good points. Yeah,
yeah.
that
And
makes sense.
there's a lot to it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that there's more, and it gives us a good idea. Now, I want to talk about owner relations specifically, because you brought
Yeah.
it up, and also because in interviewing your two other co-founders, they've both agreed on the fact that you're particularly good at that part of things of dealing with conflict, building relationships. So I would love to try to understand where that comes from, as far as you specifically developing that skill set, but also if we could try to break that skill set down into like actionable best practices and situations that you face, and sort of like in the sense like you had to coach another person at some point on how to do those things. So
Yeah.
how did you go about all of that? So yeah, what can you tell us about where you learned that, and what it entails to build those relationships with homeowners and handle conflict as it arises?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a really important balance between, of how you deal with each individual homeowner and how you make them happy, right? They're all coming expecting a different experience, and how do you manage those expectations, and whether or not the experience is what they expected it to be. How do you make sure that they leave on a good note? And I think for me, I always go back to something that seems maybe a little bit more simple, and that's I waited tables for a long time in high school and in college. Waited tables, and I think the really good servers in a restaurant, they can go in and they can walk up to a table and within 5 or 10 seconds quickly assess what kind of experience is this table looking for. Some people
Mhm.
want to come in, and some people just, they want you to deliver their food on time, and they don't really want to hear from you, and that's the experience they want, so you deliver that. Some people show up wanting to be entertained. You
Mhm.
have to be joking with them, you have to be a little flirty, you have to be a little jokey, and that's the experience they're looking for. And so figuring out very quickly what kind of experience is this person looking to have, and how do I deliver it to them so that they're happy when at the end of the day. And so
Mhm.
obviously this long-term relationship with our owners is more complex than that. But at the end of the day, I think the principles are the same. Um, so you kind of combine that with, what's important to them, and how do you frame the things that you're doing, the things you're saying, to what's important to them. But I think there's a balance too, and this is part of us coming at this company and coming at our roles as investors, right? Our owners are coming and bringing us, a lot of them is going to be one of the largest, if not the largest investment they ever make in their life. And
Mhm.
we're stewarding that for them. And a lot of people just don't know what's good for them, right? Like they come in with these preconceived notions. Maybe they read something online. Their buddy ran an Airbnb once. And so they've got all these ideas, these preconceived notions of what they should be doing, both with
Mhm.
their short-term rentals and with their property assets. And so everything, every situation that comes up, whether it's a repair or decision to add an amenity or anything like that, there's this constant balance between respecting that they own the home, it is their home, it's their asset, at the end of the day it's their decision, but influencing them in a way that, hey, this is actually what's best for you, and helping them come to that conclusion in a way that they're comfortable spending their money. It is their decision,
Mhm.
but at the end of the day, we know that that's really what's best for them. And at the end of the day, it's what's best for us too. If the homes are well cared for, and have nice
Mhm.
amenities and everything like that, we're all going to make more money. So,
I
um,
like the first thing you said there. I just want to try to go deeper, because it's so interesting, right? You're trying to gauge what type of experience that particular owner wants to have, right? So some of them might want to talk with you more frequently. Some of them might want to do phone calls. Some of them might want to do Zoom. Some of them might want to do SMS. So I'm curious to know, like, as you guys have scaled, past, to the hundreds of properties, um, how do you balance that kind of personalization that's required to really offer a great owner experience with the scalability aspect of being
yeah,
able to do this when you have not just one but like hundreds of owners, and
yeah,
each one a different way of talking with you?
yeah. I think it's a challenge for sure, and I think it's something we're kind of catching up on now. We had these first couple of years of the company where, again, I was very engaged with all of our owners. I knew each of them very well, and we had really no churn for the first couple of years of the business. I think partially because, a large part because of that. And any issue they had, I was addressing it personally, very quickly, very intentionally. And then, yeah,
Mhm.
but as we've grown, that's become a lot more difficult to be quite so engaged with every little problem that each owner has. So I think there's a couple of things that we're trying to do. We are we're working on a new owners portal that we've kind of decided to bring that in house. We've already rolled it out, but we're continuing to develop it, and I think that's going to be a really important piece, because I think what in order for people to be able to customize their own experience, they need to be able to access information and resources when they want to access them, and
Mhm.
not necessarily just when we provide them. Proactive communication, newsletters, and things like that are important, but
Mhm.
um, having access to their data, their reservations, policies, and they want to be able to see access to what's happening at their property. Job reports on maintenance items and housekeeping things. And
Mhm.
again, not necessarily just always receiving emails with reports. I mean, that's one step forward, but having a
Mhm.
place where they can go and all that information is available when they want it, I think is going to be really important for people, because we have owners that are completely hands off. They're investors, and we have one house with them, but they've got 100 other irons in the fire, and so we never
Mhm.
hear from them. They're just happy that we're taking care of their asset, right? And then we've got homeowners that this is their own, like this is their home, this is their one large investment, and so they're very involved. They want to scrutinize every maintenance item and things like that, and so being able to provide whichever experience they want, I think, is really important.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's those are great points. Let's take a step back, look, and let's go into a little bit of kind of like your founding story, because we looked at the founding story of each of your co-founders, but I want to look at it through your lenses.
Yeah.
You and your wife, I believe, were house hacking, and through investments you got into the space. So tell us a little bit more about that, and then how it led to you eventually starting Renjoy with your two co-founders.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Michael and I actually know each other because our wives have been good friends since they went to high school together and everything. They were best friends in high school. So that's how Michael and I originally got connected. And so,
Mm-hmm.
Michael and his wife were really the ones that kind of they started it. They started the house hacking. They did it first, and we kind of just followed along. We saw how well they were doing. They had started their first Airbnb in the cottage in their back, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, the Michael just kept bugging me, giving me the books, giving me the podcasts, all that kind of stuff. And
Okay.
and so we decided, all right, let's give this thing a shot. And then from there, we kind of caught the bug of house hacking. And this was 2019, 2020, 2021. And so rates were great. Airbnb was in its heyday. And so over the course of just a few years, we moved around to houses 3 or 4 times, and
Mm-hmm.
really bought as much as we could in that short period of time. And so that kind of led us to getting to the point where our portfolio was growing, still working. We were all still working our normal W-2 jobs while managing these properties, and managing short-term rentals is a lot of work. And as they start to stack up, they become more and more work. And
Mm-hmm.
so we were all starting to consider management and, outsourcing that. And as we were kind of looking around and, seeing what was out there, we just didn't find that there was anything that fit what we were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
When the big criteria were a focus on, high production and revenue,
Mm-hmm.
Michael and I in particular, we were both operating our units at the highest level. We had some of the top performing listings in the city. And
Mm-hmm.
so we didn't want to immediately give up that. And then I think also coming at it from an investment mindset. We found there were people that were really good and really focused on Airbnb, and they really focused on the guest experience, which is important, right? But it's only one part of it. The other side is, this is my asset, and I'm holding this asset over the long term through short-term
Mm-hmm.
rentals. And so what are you doing to care for my property and things like that?
Mm-hmm.
And so we just didn't find that there was anyone else that, we asked a question. They say, ask if you're talking to an investor focused real estate agent, if you're looking for one, first question you should ask is, what does your portfolio look like? What investments do you own?
Mm-hmm.
And we had the same mindset. And we found that when we were asking the managers, so what does your portfolio look like? They didn't really have one. And that was a big red flag to us. And so we think that's a really important part of our business model, and, a really big selling point to other investors out there.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because at the end of the day, we like to go into that duality of this space of, like, you have the guests, you have the owners, and it's funny because, I mean, I started by saying that we were trying to bridge that gap or connect those two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality. But at the end of the day, you do find operators that will incline more towards one side or the other in terms of just their preference and what they're trying to build brand for and optimize for. Um, Personally, of course, being very passionate about the real estate investing side, you know, of course, I think there's a lot of value in it, because at the end of the day, it is an asset, right? It is an investment.
Yep.
The property is there because an owner decided to buy it, and most likely wants a return on it, right? So
Yep.
speaking that same language, I think is fundamental. How exactly have you guys used that to kind of going back to homeowner relations, to kind of show homeowners that, hey, we have your best interest in mind, like
Yeah.
if someone's listening and they don't have that real estate background, they don't have that
Yeah.
personal portfolio of theirs, but they're managing other people's assets, like what could they do, right, to basically speak the same language as their homeowners as far as the real estate component?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of it goes back to, why we push back on owners some. I think it's easy if you're just kind of in a customer service role, right? The whole idea of customer service is to make your customer happy. And usually that means giving them more or less whatever they want, and just to make them happy. And again, that's not the attitude we take with our owners. And frankly, it's not the attitude we even take with our guests a lot of the time. At the end of the day, our owners are our key stakeholder. And I think that's kind of the crux of it. We hear, we go to some of the conferences and stuff, and I hear other managers say, we have a relentless focus on guest experience.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I'm sure your guests are having a great experience. What's your owner experience like? I like to counter that and say, well, that's nice. We like our guests too, and we want them to have a good time, but we've got a relentless, focus on our owner experience, and not just the experience, but at the end of the day, these are investments. That's what they're here for. These are investment properties, and they need to see a return. And that means revenue, and that also means reduced costs. And, what are they taking home at the end of the day? Are they going to be able to continue to maintain this property? A few years ago when we were at the peak of revenue and everything like that, it was plenty of cash flow. And so it wasn't, am I going to cash flow? It was how much can I push this asset to cash flow?
Mm-hmm.
Now that we've seen the market really settle back down, especially depending on when people purchased, if they bought in the last couple of years with high interest rates and stuff, it's not a matter of can I cash flow? It's a matter of can we perform well enough, and can we keep expenses low enough that I can afford to keep this asset and not have to sell it? We're really at that point, and we've experienced that a ton with a lot of our owners this last year of okay, how do we plan to make sure you can hold on to your asset over the long term? And because at the end of the day, that's what's best for them, right? As a manager, we want to keep that house in our portfolio, but it's far more important for that owner that they are able to hold that asset long term. And so, I think for other managers, obviously guests are really, really important, but at the end of the day, understanding the gravity that is, it's not just a hotel room that you're renting out. It's again, one of the largest, if not the largest investment that your owner's ever going to make, and you're stewarding that.
That's so interesting. And I think you just also mentioned a very good point, which is like getting into the details of like, can you hold this asset? Inevitably, that leads you into the territory of having to understand, a lot about their costs, not just the costs that you're responsible for, but also the ones that you're not, like as in the debt service, like the mortgage they have to cover and whatnot. And I'm sure a lot of operators might not want to even know those numbers, because like it's outside of their responsibility, like what kind of rate you got, and what your monthly payments are. But it's like, if you're not talking to your homeowner in those terms, like you could be showing that we're doing great in terms of gross bookings, gross performance, and you don't understand why the owner is going crazy. Well, they're going crazy because as great as it is, it's not covering the mortgage. So it's like, it requires an understanding of the fundamentals of the math that goes behind it. But what does that look like in your case? Like, do you collect that information as part of your onboarding process? Like, what their mortgage payments are and all those cost things, or what does that look like as far as obtaining that data?
Yeah, again, it really depends on the owner, kind of, and their wants and their needs. Obviously, we're not going to force them to tell us what their mortgage payment is and stuff. But I do, and even part of the sales process, I do encourage them to share that. I think as I was getting seasoned as a real estate investor, one of the things that was really opened up for me was how valuable it is to be open about your finances with other
Mm-hmm.
people, especially other like-minded, other people trying to invest. Right? There's
Mm-hmm.
something in our culture of like, hey, let's not talk too much about money,
Mm-hmm.
and once you kind of get rid of that and open that up a little bit, again, especially in an investment setting, it's a lot easier to help.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, we like to have those conversations, especially if the owner's open and willing to having those types of conversations. We definitely want to have those, and yeah, being able to give them, we're not financial advisors, and we always give that disclaimer, right? But saying, hey, I'm also an investor. Here's some things I've seen. Here's some things I've tried. Here's maybe some different options you could check out, and actually being able to talk intelligently about mortgage rates and the types of loans that they could consider getting, I think is really important. And for owner retention too, having those conversations again as things have gotten more difficult. Again, 2 years ago, and we experienced with this with a number of owners who maybe they started in 2019, and again, they were used to the first few years just making all this money, and it's not that anymore. And maybe that was their first real estate investment, and so understanding things like, yeah, just because you're not cash flowing $3,000 a month anymore doesn't mean that this is not a bad asset, or it doesn't mean that this is a bad asset. I'll have them come and say, oh man, I'm only clearing like $500 to $1,000 a month now. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
do you know how many people right now would kill to go buy an asset that's cash flowing $500 to $1,000 a month with a 2.99% interest rate? You have an incredible asset. What do you mean you want to sell? What do you mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and try to put a little more get delicately than that, but that's
Yeah,
really it, right? And framing that for them, and I think right, it's good, again, good for us because we want to retain that unit in our portfolio, but for them, that may be something that to them makes sense. Like, oh, it's underperforming, right? It's this manager is not doing a good job anymore, and framing, no, like, here's the market conditions, here's what we're seeing, and here's why this is actually still a great investment for you, and you need to continue to hold this over the long run.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and that goes back to pushing back, to your homeowners,
Yeah,
and not thinking they're always right. Sometimes they're not, and your job is to help them see things through a different lens,
yep,
and it's not always easy, right? So let's talk about that, because again, it came up a lot, the fact that you were not only just good at building relationships but also dealing with conflict. What's your approach to dealing with conflict with homeowners? Like,
yeah,
how do you approach it, but also how did you train the person that took over the role, on because it's
yeah,
it's things that might have come natural to you, but then how do you pass that on to someone else?
yeah, for sure. I think, I mean, as far as my approach, I think first off is at the end of the day, when people they have a problem, right? There's a big unexpected expense on a property, and maybe we even we drop the ball, right? Like it happens.
Hmm.
Um, I think first off is hearing them out, hearing their position, hearing their frustrations, and trying to get to the core of like, why are you upset about this? Is it the money? Because if it's literally just I can make you happy by crediting you $500, great, I can credit you $500. But a lot of the time that's not necessarily the root of it. Are they frustrated? Do they feel like now they can't trust us? Now
Hmm.
they feel like they have to get more involved with the property. They were really enjoying being hands off, and now they just don't trust us anymore. What's really at the core of what's shaking them, and why are they upset, and really trying to take their perspective. I think something else we've done that I think is really important is we've taken our owner relations team and we've really tried to separate it completely from our operations. And that wasn't necessarily the case early on, right? Because I was doing everything. And I found that, someone would, an owner would criticize, a maintenance job that was done, or they would criticize our cleaning, something like that. In me, my initial reaction was defensive because I'm doing that stuff. We're working hard. Like, you don't understand all the issues that we're dealing with. We're trying our best, all these kinds of things. And I think being defensive when an owner brings a complaint or an issue is the worst thing you can possibly do. And so the way we've got it set up now is we're completely separate. Our owner relations it's actually under sales and marketing now. And what that sets up is when the owner brings a complaint and they say, hey, I just saw this bad review. We got 1 star, and you said, the guest said that the place wasn't clean at all. This was missed, that was missed, all this stuff. What's going on? What are you guys doing with cleaning? The reaction is not like, defensive and, hey, we're trying our best. Yeah, we had a miss. Let me make all these excuses for why this happened. Our software missed something, like something didn't work out. We had to fire this person, all these excuses. The reaction is, what the heck? That's really frustrating to me. I'm upset for you. And when the owner can feel like, oh, this person is in the company and they're on my side, I think that goes a long way as well. And we follow that through. We go to our, whether it's our housekeeping manager, our maintenance manager, whoever we need to talk to, and say, what's going on with this, and understand that situation, and then go back and bring it back to the owner and help them understand, hey, maybe there is especially after they've had, a day to cool down or whatever, like, understand, yeah, this happened, and here's how we're going to fix it in the future. This is how it's not going to happen again. Owning that mistake, not trying to give excuses and dance around it, but saying, yes, we made that error, we made that mistake, and here's how we're going to fix it going forward. And I think as long as you actually fix it, most people are actually really, they're totally fine. I think when we've had issues is when they see the same problem again and again, and they keep having to bring it up. That's when people start to lose trust and lose faith. And, that's when they're going to start looking at other options.
Wow. Wow. That was good, man. That was really good because first of all, that was super practical. I love, let's talk about a few things there. First of all, the change from being an operational role to being under the sales and marketing department. That's super interesting because oftentimes we see, account management, owner relations, customer success, like as being part of operations. Makes sense, right? Because there's a certain level of technicalities that they have to be aware of. But at the same time, what that means is you end up looking for a profile that is operational. And then to your point, because they're involved in the doing, in the fixing, the reaction is inevitably defensive, right? And you don't come across as being on the side of your client. And I heard this somewhere where it's like, only one person in a conflict, if you're trying to resolve conflict, like there can only be one person that's mad. So if you're more mad than they are, like right away it just shifts the dynamic, right? Because they're if anything, they're gonna be like, okay, well, it's not that big of a deal. Like don't freak out about it so much, right? Because you're like, oh my god, this happened, like unbelievable, and you mean it, right? You mean it when you are. I think on the sales and marketing side, you're really frustrated because you're also responsible for setting those expectations in the first place. So when those expectations are not fulfilled, then it's frustrating, right? And it comes across as authentic because it is authentic. So that's super, super interesting. It also means a slightly different profile of an individual that you need, right, for that role. So does that have to do with what you were saying earlier of how you had to recycle, some people for this role a couple of times and you wish you had done so faster?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think hiring's hard, and especially hiring for a new role that you're creating this new role. Hiring's difficult, knowing what you need, right? Again, you have to rethink this whole department and this whole position because it's not just you anymore. And how is that going to flow and function? And therefore, what skills does that person need to have? And so that was part of it. I think I hired just incorrectly, to start off of. I hired the wrong skill sets. And then, yeah, like I said, I have someone fantastic in the role now. She's got a lot of great experience. She's got a ton of great customer service experience. She really does a great job caring for owners. She's very attentive, lots of attention to detail. I think the thing I'm having to work with her on is a little bit more of the mindset that we're talking about. Of I think she's hesitant with the customer service background, hesitant to push back on owners.
Mm-hmm.
And say no or explain why they've made a request and we're actually not going to do that thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's tough. It's tough. It's a higher level thing, but I'm fully confident she'll get there.
No, you're right, because you
But,
cannot be on the full opposites like side of the spectrum of like
mhm,
just the sales of like yes to everything and like yes everything is our fault, because like you can also go to that extreme, like
yeah,
you can be on the extreme of always being defensive, and that you cannot have that, but you
yep,
you can also be on the extreme of like yes we'll fix everything, everything is our fault, sorry for everything, like, and then you're like at the end of the day not solving the problem either. So
yeah,
it owner relations is a very strange mix of skills that's required. You need both,
yeah.
right?
100%. Well, and it's funny. Well, sometimes we'll get those situations, an owner will reach out and complain. Say, "Hey, there's a bunch of trash piling up on my property, and it hasn't been picked up. Looks like in weeks." So my initial reaction again is, "What the heck? Why isn't this being taken care of?" I go and I talk to our maintenance people and whoever else, and I find out, oh well, the owner actually stopped by the property, and they keep putting the trash cans in the garage when the trash company needs to be able to pick them up outside, and they're not telling us when they're stopping by the property, and they just keep doing this over and over again. So the trash is piling up because the owner is causing the problem. So now I have to go back to this owner who's upset, who's brought this problem, and tell them that they're actually the problem and they need to stop.
Mm, mm,
And again, all while maintaining a very positive relationship because we need them to stick around.
mm-hmm,
Yeah, so
mm-hmm.
it's tough. It's
Wow, no, that I like that. That's very interesting. Now, tell me a little bit more about kind of the evolution of your role, right? So you started in all these functions, operational functions that we've described, until you build them out to a point where you were ready to delegate those, and so what was next for you, and kind of where are you spending most of your time nowadays?
Yeah, I've bounced around. I think outside of maybe like finance, I feel like I've worked in just about every department
Mm-hmm.
um, in the company at this point, which is great. Yeah, like I said, from the early on, I kind of started the three of us kind of divvied up our roles. Hey, what are all the things we're going to focus on? And for me, it was operations. Not necessarily. I didn't have my background was in sales. I didn't necessarily have a smart operations background, but where I do have a background was in hospitality. Again, I was waiting tables a lot. I had worked in some hotels, done some like catering, things like that, and so I was really passionate about providing service
Mm-hmm.
and providing customer service to people. And so that's kind of how that started. And yeah, for the first couple of years, growing our onboarding, housekeeping, maintenance. And then after a couple of years, kind of started to figure out, it was growing, and those departments become very big very quickly as operations
Mm-hmm.
scale. And so started to try and bring in help. And yeah, again, it was difficult. Definitely made some mistakes. Some of these lessons that I gave on preparing a role to hand off are hard won from hiring people and not doing a good job. Maybe they were the right fit and just not doing a good job, working them through that and really just not setting them up for success. But eventually got that done. We've got a excellent director of operations now who's overseeing all of that, and he's doing a great job now. Honestly, a better job than I was doing. He's got an operational background and is doing a far better job than I was, which that's what you want at the end of the day, right? Say hire people that are
Mm-hmm.
smarter than you. And so now I've kind of shifted and getting back, like I said, sales was my background. And so shifted to overseeing more of our sales and marketing. So I'm doing a lot of direct sales myself, still very involved in overseeing our owner relations department. And then working very closely with we have an excellent marketing manager as well, our marketing manager, and he's also doing our revenue management. So he and I are working really closely together, which is fun. I don't have a whole lot of experience in marketing, so I'm learning a lot on that side of things.
Tell me something now that you're spending more time on the sales and homeowner acquisition side of things. What's different in getting new homeowners in an environment where everyone, where everyone is cash flowing and making money and times are good, versus doing so when it's
Yeah.
more challenging, like you were describing, these days? Is there anything different about the approach, or the receptiveness that you find out there? Like, yeah, what can you tell us about that?
Yeah. We're definitely still figuring out what the best new approach is, but yeah, I think the approach definitely has to be different. Especially, like I said, we grew pretty quickly. A lot of that growth early on was actually new rentals to the market. People were either buying new properties or they were converting properties they already owned into short-term rentals. Airbnb, 21, 22, Airbnb was just hot, right? It was the hot thing to do on the heels of COVID and the travel boom that we saw. And so we saw just this huge increase in supply, and so we were taking a pretty large share of that new those new units entering the market, and so growth was kind of easy on that side. And then after the first year and a half or so, we started to build. We had a reputation, right? We weren't just managing our own units. We now had 50, 60 units under management, and so we did start to get a reputation in the market, and people were actually coming to us. They started coming from other managers or from owner operating, and we're just looking to, they were looking to be more hands off. And so we kind of now had this blend of both new units coming in. Then, come in, interest rates coming up towards the beginning of last year, and seeing a lot of market corrections on the short-term rental side, 23 and 24 suddenly not being these incredible years that we saw prior. It's become a lot more difficult, right? Real estate market in general is really slow. There's not a whole lot of movement. So there's very few short-term rentals entering the market. We've also got quite a few regulations here in Colorado Springs now around short-term rentals. And so the inventory of what's available to buy for short-term rentals is made even smaller, because what's actually eligible to be a short-term rental, that criteria is far smaller. And so really at this point, it's almost only either people that are doing owner operating or people that are with other managers that are just dissatisfied. So that pool is definitely smaller, and the transition is a lot harder. There's a lot of stickiness in this industry. It's difficult to move. It's expensive to move managers. And so, yeah, we're still dialing in exactly how do we approach those people? How do we make sure we're around? And when people do become dissatisfied enough that they're like, I need to get out, how do we be their first phone call? And how do we be that alternative for them? And, it was funny early on, we were charging, especially for onboarding, we were charging kind of whatever we wanted, right? People were just eager to be in short-term rentals. And so we're like, yeah, onboarding fees and whatever else. And people were happy to pay them just to get going. And now it's like, especially people coming from other managers, it's like, okay, I'm going to no onboarding fees, and I'm going to give you a maintenance credit, and I'll come and personally help you move your couch and whatever else we need to do to make this transition inexpensive and not painful. Because otherwise it's just not worth it for them, right? They're like, and there's risk involved too, right? Like what is the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. And yeah, you hate these guys, but you at least how bad they are. You can kind of plan for it. You don't know how bad that other management company might be. So it's tough. Yeah, it's a tough atmosphere for sure.
It's an interesting perspective, right? Because it does come down to trying to, be top of mind, like you said, so that once they think of moving on, that you're the first thing they think of, the first company they think of, but also reducing the perceived friction that's associated with the transition. It's interesting what you've done there. Maintenance credits, hadn't heard of that being something, but it makes sense, right? Like, you just try to give a little bit more, and you try to, make it more appealing. Have you had to also change, like, your percentage of how much you charge commission wise? Have you had to become more competitive too?
Yeah, definitely a little more flexible these days. We had gotten to the point where we have been and knew we were at the top of the in our market, we were charging the most. And we knew that. And when people would ask about it, we would say yes. And we had a great answer as to why. We're providing premium service. Yes, that other manager charges less, but, did you know that they actually don't provide this service, that service, and this service? They're not going to tell you that. We
Mm-hmm.
kind of had the answers to that. And now people are a lot more sensitive. And,
Mm-hmm.
we were able to kind of stand our ground before. Now it's kind of like, yes, happy to match whatever rate you were paying. Like, absolutely, just come on over kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, we definitely have to get a little bit more aggressive with that. But I think that's partially to where we're at as a maturity, as a company too. Now that our operations are more stable and things like that, we can afford to take on these listings at a lower margin, where I think early on it was a lot tougher because our operations weren't in line. And so we were losing money over here and over there. And so it's like, man, we're going to lose money if we don't get these guys at top dollar. We're going to lose money if we take them at this discounted rate. And so
Mm-hmm.
now we have the ability to do that.
Makes sense. And another interesting thing that I'm sure, like, as you guys have become larger and larger, like the challenges with sales, right? When you're small, whatever property you add, or however many properties you add in a month, it has an impact, right? It has a positive
Yeah.
impact, because, like, if you went from 10 to 15 properties under management, like that's a significant increase right there. But when you're talking about in the hundreds, like, the number of properties that are required to be added to move the needle also goes up.
Yeah.
So how have you, like, how are you thinking about that, about growing at the volume and pace that's required to actually move the needle, given the scale you're at?
Yeah, we've definitely thought about trying to get more creative. I think, this whole conversation we're having, organic growth is really hard right now, and it happens, we're doing it, but it takes a lot of time and effort, and it's longer term. And so, yeah, I'm sure I'm sure there's a lot of other managers out there feeling this right now. We've built this engine. We've got a lot of staff, and we've built some really cool tech, and we've got this like really valuable engine that we built that could handle quite a few more units than we've actually got. And so we either need to grow to where, to feed this engine, or we need to start thinking about scaling this engine down. And so obviously we want to grow. That's, we're definitely in a growth mindset. And so, yeah, I think there's a number of ways to do that. A big one we've thought about is acquisition, and trying to start looking at, are there smaller managers or even co-hosts and things like that maybe, again, times are hard right now. Maybe they're just feeling that squeeze and that pain, and they're just ready to be done with it. And maybe we can help give their owners, a different experience. So that's definitely a focus of ours at the moment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. What about I don't know if this is also something that you've looked into, but like trying to manage like entire buildings and things of that nature. Is that a thing too that
Yeah.
could be
Or,
an option?
we haven't too much, and that's really around regulations here in Colorado Springs.
Mm-hmm.
The way regulations are set up right now, any one property, no matter how many units is on it, can have a maximum of 4 short-term rentals. So
Okay.
there are a bunch of brand new apartment buildings downtown here in the Springs, and like even that entire apartment building could only have 4 short-term rentals if the owner wanted to operate them as such.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Of course, that's a
Yeah.
limitation. What about expansion into new markets? How do you guys think through that? Like, is that a thing that
Yeah.
you also consider?
Yeah, I think so. We've kind of dabbled in it a little bit. We have a handful of units that we manage down in Florida, and I think that was something that we really wanted to push. And it's proven to be, we didn't know what it was going to be like. Really, it was kind of a test of, hey, how hard is it going to be to grow in a new market? And it's been hard. I think partially because of all of the constraints that we've already discussed, but also just trying to figure out how fast are we going to grow, how fast can we grow organically, and how do we keep a balance of having an operational team in place to support those units, but again, not knowing how fast we're going to grow. So what can we really afford to put in place? It's challenging. I think one thing that we've really determined for ourselves is that it'll probably need to be a little bit more of a focused effort, and it'll likely include, some kind of acquisition or maybe a partnership. Because I think going into a new market with the market as it is, without any kind of critical mass, is going to be real. It's going to be just a long, hard slog that is
Mm-hmm.
going to be really expensive and difficult.
So if we take that Florida expansion as an example, what was that recently that you ventured into that, and also like was it just one property and you were like thinking, okay, we're going to develop the
Yeah.
Florida market, therefore let's start, like just to try to understand a little bit more of like how you approached it and what could have been done
Yeah.
differently, if anything, or if looking back you would have just not gone into that market with that approach whatsoever.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad we did it. I think it was you don't know what you don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think you gotta learn some lessons the hard way, kind of thing. We did do. There's a couple reasons. We did do quite a bit of research up front. We used a lot of tools, AirDNA Enterprise and things like that to really dial in. We had a whole list of specifications of what we were looking for in a market. And as real estate investors, we were looking for not just a strong short-term rental market, but we wanted a strong real estate market where we saw, real estate opportunities for ourselves. And something else we were really excited about, and still are, is opportunities for our homeowners. One of the challenges with short-term rentals is the seasonality of them. And in Colorado Springs, we're pretty heavily seasonal. We have great summers, but we've got really slow winters, and that can be really difficult from a cash flow perspective, managing and maintaining a property, because you always got to make your mortgage payments. And so giving people the opportunity to be able to invest in an opposite seasonality market was something that, and again, have the opportunity to invest ourselves, was something that was really a big focus for us. And so, we kind of picked this area. We liked the real estate opportunities. We liked the seasonality. We liked the short-term rental market. We liked the regulations. We liked a lot of things about it. Kind of also just happened that one of our partners, Michael, he owned a house with his in-laws down there, and so they were already familiar with the area. They already had a property that he was basically just operating himself as a short-term rental. So we're like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
we've got at least one, and then kind of right within a month or so, we had a couple of existing owners interested in that. One already owned a property there. One was in the process of buying a property there. And so right off the bat, we had a few people very interested in exactly what we were wanting to do. And so that's kind of how it got started. And yeah, we were like, okay, let's start doing some marketing. Let's kind of see what kind of traction we can get down there and take it from there.
And also like size wise, like has that been paused as far as scaling goes, or is that something that just kind of like to
Yeah.
close the loop on the lessons
Yeah.
of that
Yeah.
market expansion? Where are
It's
you at
it's
there?
it's slowed down, if not paused, for the moment. It's still definitely all those things that we liked about the market are still very true, and I think we definitely plan to still make that expansion in the future. But yeah, we slowed down partially, again, it just being this strategy that we've come at it with being more difficult than we anticipated, and then some additional challenges. I'm sure like the last 4 or 5 months, that area is Florida just got hit by like 3 different big storms in a row,
Mm-hmm.
and it just makes things tougher. It makes the market a little more messy, and we had a couple of homes, had some significant damage that we've been dealing
Mm-hmm.
with, and just a number of things like that made us decide, hey, let's really make sure we've got our business here really solid, and then let's revisit and rethink our strategy and go from there.
So, would you say the takeaway is it comes down to what you were saying earlier about the critical mass that's required to open a new market, or is there anything else? Like, if tomorrow you're going to go and open a new market, what would you do differently?
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest factor. I think there's a lot of things, but I think that's the biggest factor is coming behind this in force, and both getting that critical mass as number of units, but making sure all of our teams are really prepared and behind it. I think we struggled a little bit operationally as well. Again, even with our centralized operations, right? Things like guest communication that don't necessarily need to be on location. When you've got 150 units in this town and you've got 4 in this other town, it's really hard to and you've got to have entirely different policies and procedures for these just 4 units. It's really hard to get people bought in and really understanding and caring for those units in the same way that they are with the units in your home.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. I wanna close on a bit of a personal note to try to understand, like, you mentioned you've touched almost every single department and role other than finance. What do you think it takes for someone to be able to adapt, to basically changing roles so often? Like, what have you learned that has helped you in that process of, like, having to learn basically new functions, new skills, new things fast over and over? And do you think that's something that anyone can do, or like it takes a certain type of baseline personality to be willing to dive into that many changes of responsibilities?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first off, yeah, I think it does take a certain level of comfortability with adaptability and change, and being able to roll with the punches. A big part of the reason why I ended up back in, this kind of back into this sales and marketing role is it's what the company needed right now. We
Mhm.
spent, we knew, this is about 6 months ago, we knew we needed to make some reorganization just as we'd grown and added people and roles and things. Things were getting messy. We knew we needed to go back to some fundamentals and restructure. And we ran a whole bunch of different scenarios, based on what people wanted to do, based on people's skills and all that. And at first, I'll say I wasn't particularly excited about jumping into this role, but I think it's what the company needed. And so and now I'm happy I did. I'm actually really enjoying it. But I think having first off that attitude of, yeah, I'm going to do what's needed of me for the company to be successful.
Mm.
And then, yeah, going in with a kind of a willingness to learn and a willingness to understand that maybe you're not going to be great at that next role right away. It's really easy to get comfortable in a role, right? Especially if you've been doing it for a year, 2 years, it's really easy and things just become kind of automatic. And to step out of that comfort and step into something that you maybe are not familiar with, or you haven't done as much recently, and understanding that, yeah, you're going to have to learn. You're not going to be sure. And like I said, you're going to have failures, and I think that's uncomfortable, but you just have to be comfortable with that and ready to go.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. And the mindset of, like you said, just trying to care more about the like what's good for the entity as a whole, more than what you personally want to do, right? Because sometimes they're gonna be aligned, but sometimes they're not. And being like, I mean, at the end of the day, that mindset, I mean, you're a partner, right? You're one of the co-founders, so of course,
Yeah.
as a founder, I don't want to say it's easier, but like it's easier in a sense to have that willingness to say, whatever is needed. Um, Trickier though for the collaborators that don't have, let's say, that are not partners.
Yeah.
Yet you want that too from them, right? Yet you also
Yeah.
would want your employees to be willing to do whatever is needed and have the best interest of the company in mind. How have you guys, attempted at tackling that incentives, situation there with employees?
Yeah, absolutely. That's funny. That's actually been something we've been discussing quite a bit the last couple of weeks, looking into 2025. We've got a solid core leadership team now, people we really trust and think that, are going to be with us for a long time. And so, yeah, exactly right. Like, how do you incentivize that kind of ownership? And I think partially it's just the people, right? It's their character. One of our core values at Renjoy is ownership and an ownership mentality. And so we want people to have the ownership, not just of their role, but of the company as a whole. but at the same time, and incentivizing them, like you said, as an owner, yeah, I'll jump in and do whatever, because at the end of the day, I'm going to benefit if the company flourishes because I'm an owner. And
Hmm.
so how do we compensate, our people monetarily for, when the company does well, you do well. And it's not a easy answer, but we're trying some bonus structures and things like that with our leadership team for 2025, and making a lot of that really focused around a shared bonus and a shared goal that they have to meet.
Hmm.
It's going to probably be some financial goals for the company specifically, with the idea that, hey, we're going to be very transparent with how we're performing as a company. And if we reach this benchmark, if we reach the goals that we all set together, then you're going to benefit as well. And so, yeah, I think it's important. And something we've said from the beginning that I think is difficult is we've always had a desire to be an employee owned company. We want to be able to share those benefits with the people, especially the people that are really committed, right? And the people that have shown that they feel ownership over the company, whether or not they've been given that extra monetary incentive.
Hmm.
But that's difficult to do, especially for a small business. It's not easy to just, have those types of incentives and be able to, give equity and things like that. And so I think this is a good first step towards sharing in the company's success with the people that are making it happen.
Hmm. That makes sense. That makes sense. Look, what about? I always like to ask people. There's so many tech vendors and solutions in this space. I'm sure you've seen it all. What have you not seen though? Like, what's missing? What's the piece of the puzzle that if you could just like magically make something appear, some solution, some tech, some whatever.
Yeah.
What's missing?
I think this is very much kind of from a selfish owner relations perspective,
Hmm.
but there's really not a whole lot out there for owners. Um, I know some of the really big PMSs that, where you've got kind of everything in there. They've got their own owners portals, which I think are pretty robust, because part of the problem, right, is that you've got all sorts of different data that you want to put into an owner's portal and into owner messaging, and you've got
Hmm.
to unify that in one spot. I understand the challenge and maybe why no one's really cracked this nut, but
Hmm.
for really our most important stakeholder, when churn is such an important metric, there's no software out there addressing it. Even things like owner messaging, there's nothing. There's nothing specific to our industry. There's a couple of guest experience, like guest communication softwares out there, and what I've noticed is they'll kind of maybe half on tack some, oh yeah, you could also use this for owner communications, but it's a
Hmm.
lot of workarounds and a lot of like, well, this is really meant for guests, but I guess we'll use it this way because it's better than nothing. Or you go full on and jump into a big CRM or something like that. And I think that's what a lot of people have done. I, heard a lot of people using HubSpot inventory and things like that. But even then, that's just a CRM. That's just messaging and things like that. And so I think it would be super valuable to have a software that's really focused around owners and owner relations, providing a portal, providing a spot for communication, things like that.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, no, that's interesting. Thanks for bringing that up. Well, listen,
Yeah.
look, this has been fun. I really really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great 2025, and yeah, it was really insightful, and I'm sure for the audience as well. So thanks again for joining.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, have a good one.
Have a good one. Bye.